In this video, we are going to look at the final evidence that would support the idea of continental drift theory. And that final evidence, or the last evidence, is coal deposits. The presence of coal deposits, especially in Antarctica. Okay? So, first of all, so that you can understand why this is an evidence for that, we have to look at charcoal. I know charcoal is not coal, but charcoal is related to what coal is. And in the provinces, I happen to know this because I live in the provinces. Uh, a lot of families in here actually sell charcoal in the markets as a source of living. And you know how they do that? What they do is they kind of dig a hole in the ground, right? And then they place wood or maybe coconut husks or coconut shells, and then they kind of burn, but they don't burn it in the open air. They kind of again dig a hole, place the wood there, and then burn it there. So what this does is it burns the wood into and becomes charcoal, but it's not the same as burning the wood outside of the hole. Because when you burn wood outside of the hole, the wood would simply just become ember, right? And then when all of the energy of the ember is consumed, it just becomes ash, and ash is useless. It has no energy left. But in this process, it still gets burned, so to speak. But because there's a small hole, there is limited oxygen that can enter. So if there's limited oxygen that can enter in the burning process, there's a weird thing that happens because the wood burns, but because of the limited oxygen, it doesn't burn into ember. It kind of burns into another form that's not ember, and that form is charcoal. It burns and becomes charcoal. And what's the difference between charcoal and ember? Well, ember gets consumed and becomes ash and it has no energy left. But charcoal is kind of like burned, and yet it still contains some energy left. So that's why you sell this in the market, and people, buy charcoal, and then you light up the charcoal again, and then you can create, you can use that for your barbecue because it still has energy left. So the key here is it burns with limited oxygen, and therefore it really decomposes. If you think about it, it decomposes, but not completely into ash, but into a form that still has energy in it. Okay? So understand that concept, because that's because of the limited amount of oxygen. Now, what is coal? Coal is something similar. Coal is just plant material, like, leaves of plants, and then this plant material is buried underground. Okay, so usually this happens when you have marshlands. So the plant material is really submerged in water, so the water kind of acts as a barrier, and the key here is oxygen cannot penetrate. So if oxygen cannot penetrate, then it's like the burning of the wood again. The plant materials decay, right? Just like the wood burns, but it doesn't decay completely into ash. It decays into a form called coal. Okay? So when plant materials are buried in marshlands or underground and it has no access to oxygen, it decays, but it doesn't decay completely into nothingness or into soil, but it becomes coal. But the key here is you need a lot of plant materials, right? And why is this an evidence? Well, because in Antarctica, right now, there is no plant. There is hardly any living thing there. In fact, in Antarctica, aside from bacteria and lichen growing underneath the permafrost, there's really nothing else that are living there except for scientists, maybe, right? Some random bears, polar bears. But the fact is, there's no plant life there. So if there's no plant life there, how come Antarctica has one of the largest coal deposits? Right? If you think about that, coal is created from plant materials and living things. So therefore, if there's no plant living in Antarctica, then how could it have developed coal deposits? Right? So if you look back to the narrative of the continental jigsaw, you would find that Antarctica was once near the equator. So if you corroborate the story, it may be that Antarctica was in the equator. It grew a lot of plants in marshlands, and those plant materials from marshlands decayed into coal because of the less access to oxygen and became coal deposits now. And because of the continental drift, Antarctica drifted into the South Pole, and now we find the coal deposits where there should not have been any, because there should have been no plant in Antarctica if it was there. If we believe in the thesis that Antarctica never moved and it was already there in the South Pole, then we should not have coal deposits. But the fact that there are coal deposits points to the fact that there must be a lot of plant materials in Antarctica, which points to the fact that those plants, specific plants that create coal, are those that thrive in the equator. Points to the fact that the Antarctica was once near the equator, and therefore it tells you that coal deposits would not be possible without continental drift, right? So therefore, the presence of coal deposits in Antarctica specifically, is a proof that Antarctica drifted somewhere near the equator towards where it is now, which is in the South Pole.